Hello and welcome to yet again another episode of A VO's Journey. My name is Anthony Pica, and this show is all about helping the new and upcoming voiceover artists grow their business and sidestep all of the crazy things that I seem to step on. Well, after yesterday's emotional podcast, thank you all so much for the wonderful feedback and everything that I've been getting. I really do appreciate it. And moving forward with all of the things I talked about yesterday in mind, I wanted to share with you a project that I'm working on right now. And, just some things that I'm going through thinking about my performance and that I thought I could share with you to maybe help you out with your future performances. All right? Let's do it. This is VO's Journey. With your host, the incomparable Anthony Pica. All right, so I have been hired to do The Great Gatsby from a company that, takes books that are in the public domain and they republish them and then, hire narrators to narrate them. And I've actually done a decent amount of public domain books for this company in the past. And they came back and hired me to do The Great Gatsby. So I'm really excited about that. I'm sure you've probably read it or you've heard of it. It's about 4.5 to 5 hours long finished, and it's just a wonderful book. There was a movie that came out in the last, 10 to 20 years that had Leonardo DiCaprio as Gatsby, and I think there was definitely a huge famous cast that did that movie, and it's just a wonderful book. I absolutely love it. So with that being said, I want to kind of go into talking to you about what I'm doing while I'm performing this book, some things that I'm thinking about, and just some things overall. So I want to start off first with the transaction that happened. I went ahead and got notification from the company that I've worked with in the past that they wanted to hire me. And usually when I do audiobooks, by the way, this is not on Fiverr or any other platform. This is a company that we've worked together on so many books, and they've spent a large amount of money. I mean, I think they've it's at least been between $10,000 to $20,000 they've spent with me on doing books in the past. We work we work off of any platforms. So anyways, the first thing, though, is I usually charge half up front and half on the back side. But at some times, because especially what's happening right now, I'm very aware of the situation, and, I'm trying to help out as many businesses as well with pricing. So with this particular job, I went ahead and took the job at a little bit less of a price than what I normally do. So instead of $250 to $300 per finished hour, I think I think this is around maybe $200. It's about $200. Yeah, it's about $200 per finished hour. But here's the thing. I went ahead and accepted a lower price. However, I asked kindly that they, pay me up front, the whole thing, so that, I could cover that cost, gave them a deadline, and they agreed at the lower price, but paying up front. And see, I like that. And that, use that tip for you in negotiating, because the reality is that when you get paid up front and that money actually goes into your account, and remember, this is not on Fiverr, so that money was directly deposited into my account, and because it wasn't on Fiverr or something like that, there was no 20% taken out. So that was a big deal for me, because even if that was on, another platform, $900, $1,000, $1,200 would have turned into 20% less, right? So 1,000 would have only been 800. So anyways, so I accepted that, and I was paid all up front, which was very nice. And as I go into this book, I want to go over a couple key things that I do when I'm looking at a book where, first off, that's such an epic book. I mean, meaning that, it's legendary. You know what I mean? It's definitely a book that is well known all around the world. How do you approach a character and multiple characters? I mean, there's all sorts of characters in this book. There's men, women, multiple characters, but more importantly, these are characters too that are really they really have lived a life, living lives that I am completely unfamiliar with, right? So the first thing, and I know this might come out of left field, but the first thing is I really try to give myself room to make mistakes. And this is something that it's taken me a long time to get to a place where I feel comfortable with this, because I think most of us step up to a microphone, we try to perform, we try to act, and we're so concerned about, do we sound okay, and do we have pitch variation, and are we going too fast, are we going too slow? We're so concerned with all of these things that we forget to let ourselves simply play and make mistakes, meaning like giving ourselves permission to just go for it and do things that are not necessarily what we would normally do, experiment. So that's something that I've really forced myself to try to do with, my speech patterns and things like that, because the reality is that whether you're playing Gatsby or, whoever, these characters are completely unique and really special and out there. So, you're going to need to have some sort of, I don't know, extra sauce, if you will. Okay. So anyways, that's really the first thing that I do is I give myself permission to try things, make mistakes, go crazy. Here's another cool little tips and stuff I have. Another thing is when you're dealing with books like this, or books that have already been done and you're redoing them or something, a great tip is to actually go and get an audiobook recording of it. Listen to what other people have done. You know what I mean? Listen to multiple ones. Listen to the different pacing and how it sounds and what you like and what you don't like. Use the resources that are available to you to listen to what people are doing or what people have done and how you like it and what you like and what you don't like. I mean, listen, the reality is great theater, great actors, great playwrights, right? We take what people have done before us, and then we take that and we turn it into our own, meaning that we add our own spice to what's already been done. And I love that about acting. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. So in this particular case, I've also gone out and I've bought some different audiobooks. I've been listening to different ways people have been saying them, and how to speak and how to approach that certain type of way. And you have to think too, I am, I've lived in Virginia most of my life, so I do have, and it comes out, and especially in specific words, I have some Southern twang. I try to. I've done my best to continuously work well on a neutral American accent, but it definitely has some Southern twang to it occasionally, and I can definitely go there if I need to. But this book is definitely very not Southern twang, and more so, definitely northern, northeast, highfalutin society. Also, if you think about it, very transatlantic style, which was, an upper class, not British, but British sounding in a way, right? So it's definitely an adventure. So anyways, I use that tip, right, is to go through and also do that. But also, because of the book itself, there's also tons of notes. There's also tons of writing. Also, another thing I do is, with the manuscript, I actually like to listen to the audiobook being done, as well as reading through the words while you hear it being done. I love that because, and by the way, this is because there is a book that I'm doing that has been done over and over again, It's easily accessible to find all these things. When you're doing a book that's brand new or there's never been audio or anything done, you're not going to be able to do this. Okay. But you can use, I use this, but since we're talking about this, I use this particular tip or tactic to actually learn how to say some of the words, because the reality is I don't, when you are doing a book that was written, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years ago, et cetera, there's going to be a lot of vocabulary that we're just not familiar with. So this is another great way to figure out how words are spoken, what, in the context, what they mean, gives you an idea of how to do it up front. Now, here's another thing. And, this is something that I've been a big proponent of, and that is either do you read the text first and then narrate, or do you narrate without reading the whole text? And the reality is that a lot of times, most of us right now, we're not paid a lot of money to where it makes financial sense, from cost to time analysis, if you want to look at it that way, to read an entire book and then go back and narrate it and then go back and listen to it again. I mean, that just adds such a larger amount of time. So what I do, though, is when I do have a book, and especially a fiction book, and this is what I would recommend to you, when you are doing a fiction book, you really got to, you've got to read ahead. You really do. You've got to know what's coming, or you got to at least understand the characters. I always tell that story, and I know probably many of you would recognize the story. I tell it about, I was narrating a book, and I got about towards the end, and I found out that this guy, it was a sci-fi thriller that I had been playing as this tough New York, sergeant from New York, was actually from Minnesota. And, the accent was such, I did this, heavy, thick New York accent, right? And and then all of a sudden it's the guys from Minnesota, and it's like, oh no. And I, I messaged the playwright, and I was like, I messaged the author, and I was like, I'm so sorry. Now, mind you, I had been submitting this to him, so he was fine with it. But I was like, oh my gosh, it's from Minnesota, man. How this doesn't sound right. And he's like, no, the guy actually said, no, listen, in Minnesota, this is what the guy said. In Minnesota, we don't know how we speak a bunch of different ways. I really like the New York style better. So he let me keep it that way. And between me and you, though, I think the context of the book, it's a little weird because he's from Minnesota, but he has this thick New York accent. I mean, he could have lived in New York, but you get what I mean. So the point is, though, is that you got to read ahead to know these things, because heaven forbid he was British. Right. And then, you can't cover that up. I mean, I would have had to go back and narrate the entire thing over because it was in first person. So, those things are important. Also, it's important to know, for example, maybe you're narrating someone, maybe you are doing something in the first person, and your character has a secret, and you had to know these things. So with a fiction book, I really do think it's really important for you to move forward in reading. Now, the cool thing about a book like this is that there are many different tools out there, like Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, just summaries and things that you can get an idea, character backgrounds, understanding that's been done for you. Again, this is something because I'm doing an older book, which I really enjoy because there's so much material to dive into, right? When you're doing your own, or when you're doing a new one, you have to create all of these things on your own. You've got to create a background. You've got to give yourself permission. Remember I said you got to give yourself permission to make mistakes. Well, you got to give yourself permission also to imagine this person is and their background. Imagine the secrets they have. Imagine what's happening. Now, if you are narrating in the first person, right? Imagine how they are feeling. Imagine what they've been through. Imagine what part, where are they in the storytelling process, right? Like if they start at the beginning, are they telling the story from the knowledge of they've already been through all this and they're telling you the story from the beginning, or are they like halfway through? Authors use a lot of different tools, right? Especially in fiction. Nonfiction is a different story. And, I'm a big supporter in nonfiction of unless, unless it is a nonfiction written in a very fictional style. I mean, written in like a very storytelling style, that I don't spend extra time reading the book, right? Because I don't have time to do that. And quite honestly, I don't need to, because in nonfiction, 9 times out of 10, there isn't some surprise ending. It's not meant to be that way, right? It's more expository. So you have to take that in consideration. So anyways, that's something that I do, especially with a newer book, is I really focus in on how to, like how my character would be, how they would talk, how what is all of this stuff done to them? What is this journey? What has this journey created to them? And by the way, again, you don't know what the journey's done to them unless you've actually read the journey. So that's a tip. And by the way, when you go to price, that is another thing to consider. If you are pricing at a certain rate, you have to understand too that if you price at a certain rate, or you're working, let's say you're working with someone who they're not going to pay you, they're going to pay you pennies, and you are taking my advice by making sure the cash flow is still rolling in. So you decide to do something, and you're like, well, I'm going to do this book. It's not paying great, but I plan on using a pseudonym. You're always, no matter what you do, put your best performance forward, but at the same time, consider too that you might not have the ability to do everything you can, like with another book where you're paid double or triple or something. So you have the time to invest extra in it. So what I suggest in those cases is skim. Here's a little tip I do also, is I at least read the chapter I'm going to narrate first. Instead of reading the whole book at once, at least read the chapter you're going to narrate. Also, go to where the book is published, because once we narrate a book, it has to be published. Read the synopsis. Read what's out there about it. Read what the author says about it. Do a little bit of research so you can at least feel like you have some knowledge about it. The more information you have about the book, it puts you in the position where you are at least one step ahead of the listener. Okay, so that way it puts you into a position where you are the right person to tell the story, as opposed to you finding out about the story just like the listener is. Okay, all right, so those are just some tips and some things about, when I'm narrating what I'm doing right now for this book. And I had to tell you, I've realized that I think that, it is what it is, but the older I get, my voice does change. The more the more coaching I do, the more teaching I do, the more challenging it actually becomes for me. And this is being straight up honest with you. The more challenging it is for me to sound less authoritative and more, in this idea of discovery. I mean, the idea right in The Great Gatsby is that there's this, journey of, a young man who can't really stand anymore where he necessarily came from and what's happening with high society. He loathes the personalities, and he can't stand it. And he's trying his best to stay away from it while still make a living. But then he meets Gatsby, right? And Gatsby is the exception to this rule, because Gatsby's personality bridges all of that for him. It's extremely unique, and he is awestruck by it. So so for me, that's not really something that I really relate to. So it's definitely a challenge to me, and I'm trying to channel back to times when I felt like that and I was awestruck by someone. And there has been a few people in my life that I definitely been awestruck by, and it's definitely something that is a challenge for me, and I really like that challenge. But it's identifying that also helps me when I narrate, so that, again, I'm not narrating from a place where Anthony is narrating as an authority, but more so I'm narrating, as a person discovering or a person interested in telling the story of my own discovery as a young man in a time where, I I disliked a way of life, but I fell in love with the same thing I disliked. I mean, it's really a great story. So anyways, I hope this has helped at least give you some ideas. I didn't go into like nuts and bolts about tempo and pitch, and you've got volume and energy and diction and your separation and expressiveness. I didn't go into all those things, but I wanted to go into, at least today for you, about the thoughts that are going through my mind as I narrate a book like The Great Gatsby that is just amazing book. And I think for all of us as audiobook narrators, these are the type of books that we really love to narrate, right? Because they're so well written. They're not, I mean, you know what I mean? They're not those, they're not those put together by an AI books. Uh, you know what I'm talking about. These are really well written books, and it's so much fun to read and to narrate fiction that is well written. It's just, I had to tell you, by the way, if you're, on a side note, if you're in limbo and you're questioning whether or not you should be narrating audiobooks because you continuously get these books that make you cringe, trust me, there are amazing books out there that will actually make you want to be an audiobook narrator. I think when you're starting out, though, it's challenging to get to those books at first. So don't fear, you will get there, and you got to kind of climb up through the muck, if you will, to get to the top. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, and always, if you get an opportunity, go ahead and leave a review over on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you might be listening. And thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful Thursday, and I will talk to you soon. All right, you guys. Peace.